Hello, everybody. I just thought we would have a chance to kind of wrap up this week. We're winding down January. Kind of hard to believe that 1 out of 12 is gone. But I wanted to take a moment to just get real. For so many individuals, they don't really want to come to terms with what's going on until it's way too late. And it's really unfortunate because we're beyond the boiling pot scenario of a frog. It's already boiling. So I wanted to talk today about CommiFornia, how the systems were built and how they were turned against you. Whether or not you live in California, whether or not you live in the United States, and whether or not you live in the world, this system affects you. Now, what we've seen in Davos this week is something that nobody fully expected, except for those in the community that have been following the truth. We knew this was coming, and there's a lot more behind it. But until we get to that point of freedom again, here we are in CommiFornia, and it's not getting better. So again, today I want to talk how the systems were built and how they were turned against you. This is Tech Reality with Barbara, coming from Silicon Valley. So the story, the stakes, and why it matters. Today we are not talking about politics, we're talking about systems. Systems that you paid for, systems that your parents built, systems your grandparents believed would outlast them and outlast generations to come. The thought of building generational wealth existed, and it meant something. And we're asking a simple question. How did the most productive state in the richest country in human history become a place where people are fleeing while being told it's working exactly as intended? Or if you call a software company, the program is working exactly as intended. We're not giving you a refund. California was never free, and it was never cheap, but it worked. Roads worked, water flowed, power stayed on, schools educated our children and prepared them for an intellectual career, and jobs paid. Something changed, and it didn't happen by accident. Today matters because you cannot fix what you do not understand. And California's collapse, economic, civic, and morale, is not a mystery. It is a predictable outcome of decisions layered over decades. People made this plan. I often think, who were the group of people that sat around a table and decided that how can we steal more money from Californians? Oh, I know. If they have money in their savings account and they leave it there for more than 36 months, they have clearly abandoned it, and we won't let them know it, because even if it's a bank account, they probably get monthly bank statements, but we're not going to tell them. We'll just take the money. They abandoned it. They won't even notice. And if they do, they can fill out a form and get their money back. Well, then who sat around a table and decided that, 3 years is too long for a savings account? Why should we ever have to wait that long? 12 months. If somebody waits 365 days and doesn't check their account, doesn't move a penny in or out, doesn't have direct deposit, they've clearly abandoned their money. And that belongs to the state. Who are the people that sat around and decided that that's the way that we're going to treat one another? Guarantee it wasn't me. So again, today matters because you cannot fix what you do not understand. And California's collapse was planned, and that's what we need to understand in order to move forward. So let's take a step back. I like to break down these conversations into segments. So segment 1, the original California deal. It's a history lesson, a little bit of a foundation here. This is really meant to understand that those here at the time didn't have choice either. They didn't have voting rights, for one. But even today, I have voting rights, but I haven't voted for any of these corrupt policies that empty out my pockets and make it to a level of just barely surviving. But if we look at the history lesson as a foundation, let's just go back to 1848. That was a starting point that I thought would be fair. There was a Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The United States purchases California and surrounding territory from Mexico. They made a deal and they bought it. It no longer belonged to Mexico. This idea of squatting on their land or stealing their land, whether they voted for it or not, the governments made an agreement, and the price paid was $15 million. So I've been told if we adjust it for today, that would be about $600 million in today's money. That's significant. What the US got, they got California and Nevada and Utah, parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. So this is a major agreement that they made. That purchase meant something. One of the most consequential real estate transactions in history. And yet still today, individuals who were not around in 1848 or their parents or their grandparents are crying that we're on stolen land. Yet what have we done with this land? We've preserved it. We built homes. We built families. We've created entire industries, whether it's Hollywood or Silicon Valley. And of course, we'll talk about the gold rush. There's been a lot that's gone on with this land as we've welcomed people from all over the world as visitors and immigrants, as a proverbial melting pot. Let's bring everybody together. It's all best if we're together, one big family. And this is what California stood for. You could look up and down the state and always meet somebody that's traveling through or has settled there for generations. They may or may not look like you, but that was really irrelevant. We're all living a life that kind of weaves in and out of one another. That's the beauty of California. So we've been told. In 1848 to 1855 was the gold rush. California explodes from about 15,000 residents. So again, there were a small group of people here in California, at least when the land was bought. We got to 15,000 residents, and within a 7-year period, we ended up at over 300,000 residents. That is a big boom. Now, everybody didn't come to extract the gold, but there were other businesses needed. People had to get foods. People had to prepare the food. People had to prepare infrastructure. What about the tools to extract the gold? Entire cities were founded around supporting smaller groups of individuals who were here for that gold rush, that opportunity to change their life forever in one facet or another. Wealth was extracted fast, but not managed long term. California's DNA is extraction before stewardship. Strip out all the money. This is why so many millionaire, tens of millionaire, large paid athletes, even doctors, all of a sudden come into an immense amount of wealth and have no idea how to manage it short term or how to manage it long term. That takes some skill to be able to plant the seeds, find the fertile ground, let them grow. That's something that we can practice and learn and grow into. But California's DNA, once again, is about extraction before stewardship. And I mention this because during the dot-com era, before the dot-com bust, one of the companies that I managed mergers and acquisitions for, they were acquiring about 63 companies a month. It was mass acquisition. And yes, as I went through all their financials and laid out an entire process engineering plan for this massive company, nobody knew where the money was coming from and nobody knew where it was going. Does that sound familiar to what we're seeing right now with maybe a particular nonprofit? Well, that's what's going on in California as well. Minnesota has been in the news. Where's the money coming from and where's it going? Well, with this particular company, it didn't matter to them because money was coming in so fast during the dot-com era. All they had to do is hold out their hand. And I joke, like spaghetti, whatever you throw to the wall and it sticks, you keep. Anything that falls to the ground was riffraff anyways. They had shipped servers all over the planet in order for people to use their, and I don't want to go too far on what they are right now, but their platform. They could only tell me where 2 servers were. They don't know where the others even ended up. And yet somehow this was acceptable because it was other people's money. They'd extracted into their bank accounts what they were going to use to buy huge homes and whatever all they did with it. But other people's money, they didn't care as long as they got their own. A lot of people lost a lot during that dot-com era. It was primarily investors. People like you and I that had money in 401ks that got put into these indices without even a vote. If you were a teachers union or public entity or with a corporation that managed the 401k, you didn't know that that's how people were handling your retirement. So again, California DNA is about extraction before stewardship. I'm going to move on to segment 2, infrastructure and immigration waves. Railroads and Chinese immigration. In the 1860s, Chinese labor builds the Transcontinental Railroad. They were paid less, they worked more, and then in 1882, there was a Chinese Exclusion Act. And then we saw displacement after utility. These individuals didn't look like everybody else. They didn't blend in. In fact, in San Francisco, they created a Chinatown for them not to leave. It wasn't about a melting pot. These people were used for cheap labor. Many of them didn't make it. And yet this built our railroads, the infrastructure we used even till today to move supplies, people. It's a massive impact in our country. But from this notion, many of us have an idea that the H-1B visa program, for example, is built on this concept. Companies can pay less money to H-1B visa holders and save money. Use the labor. But that's not what the H-1B visa process is in Silicon Valley right now. Now, I will say in other industries outside of tech in Silicon Valley and also other businesses outside of Silicon Valley, I'm not noticing the same pattern. But as I mentioned in the last company I was with, the individuals with H-1B visas openly stated that they were getting 7.5 to 12 times more than myself or my local peers. They were priority hired, snuck into the countries, priority trained, and priority promoted. And then just like we saw with the Minnesota Somalis, they wanted to choose their own. They only wanted their culture. They wanted to work with those who spoke their language. They brought their culture, their language, and their ideals into this country. And in a sense, that's the conversation that we've always heard, right? It's a melting pot. That's what this is about. But really, it wasn't about a melting pot. And it isn't today. Those individuals that got paid 7.5 to 12 times more at the same company I was at, they now bought up the homes that individuals like myself have lost. We can't compete making that much less money. And yet we pay the taxes, the infrastructure. We have built this. And we're being pushed aside. So no, the H-1B visa of today is not the cheap labor that was originally used. That wasn't okay then, and this isn't okay now. But California mastered a pattern early on. Invite labor, use it, even blame it, and expel it, and repeat. This mindset seems to be burnt throughout California. So then if we look at Japanese farmers and the internment camps that California had, if you are able to go through Silicon up to San Francisco, rather, to Golden Gate Park, there's a beautiful area of Chinese gardens. It's absolutely magnificent. In fact, there's two areas, one across the street from the other. Unfortunately, that belonged to a Japanese family. And I say Japanese, but I think they were actually born in this country. They were just of Japanese descent. But when, after the war or during the war, the United States couldn't trust them. So they put them in internment camps. And in my understanding, they lost that land. They never got it back. Now, I could be wrong on my history, and maybe there was a reparation later. But that's not right either. That's not who we are as a group of people. So in the early 1900s, Japanese immigrants dominated agriculture in California. World War II, internment camps were created. Land was seized, sold, and redistributed. Families were never fully compensated. Property rights in California have always been conditional. The news this week in San Diego was a council member has now proposed that if you have a second home in San Diego, which many people do because it's a beautiful beach town, it's beautiful, great weather year around. They've done wonderful development. There's lots of nature preserves, lots of areas to bring your dogs, and truly enjoy the ocean. However, if you think that you can have a second home there and not live in it, you are sadly wrong, according to this council member. And this isn't the first time it's coming up. It's going to keep coming up until it happens. If you have got a vacant property that you're not living in because you're living somewhere else, $8,000 a year to you. What about if you want to do short-term rentals like Airbnb? No, you can't do that. $8,000 to you. They expect to raise somewhere around $100 million a year in penalties for people who are already paying property taxes, have already bought the homes and the land, have families go and enjoy the time, the respite, relax. This is part of what capitalism is, an opportunity to build a future, to have vacations, to enjoy life, make your own choices and freedom. And yet San Diego is now deciding, and it hasn't been decided yet, that no, you don't have a right to do that because people need homes. Well, who needs homes? All the people that have been massively squeezed into California, when we are told we don't have enough water, so we are constantly paying the highest rates for water, as Newsom and governors before him dump our water out in the ocean to make sure that the prices of the supply and demand are artificially much higher. We don't have enough. So why are we building all these homes if there's not enough water? PG&E is saying they're too squeezed on electricity. They can't produce enough. So we all had to put on solar panels. And yet the gentleman this week on YouTube came out saying that why does he have to pay over $8,000 a year? That number 8 keeps coming up to PG&E on top of the $30,000 that he already paid for his solar panels. How does that work? They buy it from him at 8 cents and sell it back to him at 47 cents. And when I put my solar panels on, it caught the main part of the day where the sun would be on them for the most amount of time. But then PG&E realized, wait a minute, that wasn't fair. So then they changed the times that you could actually use the solar panels and credit them to your house, and when they would sell them back to you. It's all theft. It has nothing to do with the environment. It's all artificially created. And again, we know this because why does somebody in San Diego not have a right to have a vacation home, get a penalty of $8,000 proposed, and yet we have this freebie sign hanging out in our front yard saying anybody from anywhere on the planet can sneak over our border and settle here because we will give you free food, free housing, free cash, free unemployment if you've never worked, free Social Security if you've never earned it, free medical. You go right on down the list. Well, if it says free, it's not free. It's coming out of your pocket. You can only be taxed to the nth degree before you too reach a cliff. There's just no more lint in the pockets. So with the Japanese farmers and internment, we learned that property rights in California have always been conditional. In segment 3, post-war California, the golden age. Aerospace, defense, manufacturing, ports, suburbs, universities. This is when the systems worked because contributors were rewarded. Now, I went to UC San Diego. I chose that school because it was the furthest UC from home. I really didn't know much about it. I applied to a lot of universities. That didn't narrow my choice. I got accepted into all of them. I wanted to make sure I didn't go into debt. Yes, that was something I had top of mind back then. I could think for myself and understand what money meant. However, when I went back to UC San Diego a few years ago, my jaw hit the floor. It's not a university anymore. It's a pharmaceutical facility. So if that all land that is a nonprofit under the UC Regents for the purpose of education of individuals living in California, why is there mass income, grants, government spending and control for pharmaceuticals, drugs? Why? This is baffling to me. And education, well, it should be free now. With all of that money going through and that land being used, they obviously have an immense amount of cash flow. So why has even going to a UC school, University of California school, as a local taxpayer, unattainable for so many people? Because the money is being wasted, abused, and you're being squeezed. Many can't even get into the UC system because I think it was Janet Reno that decided that, wait a minute, people from outside of California, whether it's outside of the state, in another state, or international, as a penalty, they're charged more because they haven't contributed via taxpayers to the wealth. And so they pay more. But she realized, wait a minute, this is called leverage. We're going to reduce the amount of individuals from California who qualify and can attend, and we're going to increase monies from out of state and specifically international from 2 specific countries in order to recoup more money. And you know how I found out about that? Because I wasn't political. I kept my head down. I just studied. I was excited to have access to so many classes. And yes, back then you went to classes. You sat there. You listened to the professors. You studied the notes. You took the exams on your own. But all of a sudden I was told I had to leave the school. I'd only been there a few years. I hadn't gotten my senior year, but I had taken way too many credits and they needed the space for somebody else. Meanwhile, I had asked for job opportunities and internships and really wanted to pave a path for myself, but I was never selected. And yet I had two eyes and I could see who was selected. They weren't anybody with blonde hair. So we can see a pattern of choices that have happened. I don't say because of my blonde hair I should have been selected, but what I do say is because of DEI, I should not have been selected. So what about the Vietnam War? The nail salon economy. Have you ever noticed when you want to get your nails done, who runs those businesses? The Vietnamese refugees primarily resettled in California. Tippi Hedren, Hedren, had a brilliant idea. She wanted to give these individuals opportunity. So she introduced them to the nail cosmetology training as a lifestyle, something they could use to open a shop and take care of their families. Nail salons have become an immigrant success story. What about the Filipinos in healthcare? Long-standing pipeline into nursing and caregiving has been very nurturing in the Filipino community. And so they come into our community and assist in a much needed field as well. I know back when I was younger, so if we go back maybe about 40 years ago, a lot of individuals from the Tonga community were here and they worked in healthcare, specifically home healthcare. Phenomenal individuals, very, very kind. They had the strength, they had the personality, they had the intelligence, added greatly to our society. Silicon Valley, Russians, Indians, Chinese engineers. But then what happened to our school system? As we're prioritizing the increase of individuals coming from these countries, our education, California, one of the fourth or fifth largest economies, specifically Silicon Valley, before the dot-com bust, was known to be the fifth largest economy in the planet, just the Valley. Our education is mediocre at best. Math, just come up with something that feels good. Output, be lazy. We'll just give you money, sit at home. This isn't what we want. And as we fight for education, it's an upward battle because we know we're not going to get the jobs anyway. Capital flows where productivity lives. Who's being highlighted as productive and who's allowed to hire others? And as I mentioned before, a particular group of people receives priority hiring, priority training, priority promotion. Meanwhile, you and I receive priority termination with a swift kick in the butt. California is not a melting pot. It was a relay race, each group building on the last. You may think you're friends with your neighbor and you're being kind. You're being undermined. Segment number 4, the shift from systems to ideology. At some point, contributions stopped being the entry fee. Really? Have you ever gone to Walmart and just stood there and seen how many people pull an EBT card out of their wallet? Almost everyone. Your tax dollar is giving them money. And almost everyone. And if they don't speak this language, it's not even a requisite in order to participate in the free programs for life. Now, out of university, I moved to South America. And in one particular country, I really wanted to work. I wanted to be a part of the community. I wanted to move down there. on a long-term basis. So I went to the office in order to get a work permit. I wasn't allowed one. I was a foreigner. Everybody there that worked there looked like me. A lot of the people from this country are from Germany. And yet there was no, hey, we're going to slide $5 this way, or we're just going to give you free money. There was none of that. So I had to figure out a way to make it work. So I did. I started my own company and I hired locals. And I respected their culture and their holidays and had extreme gratitude that those that worked alongside me and gave me an opportunity to stay there longer in their country that I was a guest. And yet individuals here like Ilhan are saying that this is her country. This is the way that things need to get done. And she would have never come here if she were to be treated like this, if she knew she were to be treated like this. How do you go from $0 to $50,000 to $30 million in a matter of a few years and say this is a horrible country when you're robbing us blind? So at some point, the contribution in California stopped being an entry fee. You don't have to contribute. In fact, that might be a hindrance. In the late 1970s and 1980s, academic movements reframing power, equity, and ownership. And we learned about Berkeley. They had a critical theory expansion, not conspiracy, but documented intellectual shifts, where they had on-campus meetings on how to bring in Marxism, socialism, communism, all the while teaching and training this high-level institution that capitalism is bad. People with fair skin are horrible individuals. As Berkeley became one of the most desired universities to go to for foreigners, international, to continue helping themselves with our tax dollars. And then we have Proposition 13 of 1978. It protects homeowners like you and I from runaway property taxes, knowing that California was on an uphill rampage with all the industries and everything that California had to offer. What the vision was, because somebody paid too much for the home next to you, you could lose your home as property taxes skyrocket. Now, we really saw this during COVID in other states. People fled New York and California, and they went to other states and they drove up the price of homes. So an individual that had owned a home there for generations, their property taxes adjusted to an outrageous amount. Many of those lost their homes for the newcomers that were from California and New York, fleeing outrageous property taxes there, but brought their California and New York dollars. So maybe property taxes were $100 a year. All of a sudden now they're $6,000 a year in economies that didn't support that. The job market didn't support that. So Prop 13 made it so that as individuals next door to you paid more for your home as it increased, you paid closer to the amount that you paid for your home. It reevaluates every year, but it can only be so many percentages a year. So it stabilized the middle class. And again, it protected homeowners from runaway property taxes. Well, what happened during COVID? Everything happened in the darkness. In 2020 came Prop 19. People were told that, hey, it's not fair. It's not fair that some people don't hold their weight paying their share of the taxes. So Prop 19 came in and wiped out generational wealth in one moment. It limits the inheritance of property protection. The homes that I had, I could no longer pass on to my son, my children. I was being attacked by high property taxes. And as you know, had to deal with squatters, ultimately having to walk away from a home I loved. But it didn't matter because with Prop 13, my son couldn't have it anyway. And it forces reassessments to make it fair for everybody. It doesn't matter that you've been here a long time and paid taxes. We're going to squeeze more out of you. And by the way, have you left your savings account unattended for more than 12 months? We'll take that too. What if you're elderly? You've worked your whole life for planning for retirement. You wouldn't know about these new theft plans. And in a blink, just like my neighbor, at 82 years old, 2 police officers knocked on her door and removed her for trespassing because somebody from another country decided to file an affidavit of death and tell the county that she died. She never expected this. How do you fight something like that? Years later, all she wants is to be able to go back in her home. And you know what the solution was? They arrested her and put her in jail. That's the solution. Not in my world. So from Prop 13 from 1978 that protects and stabilizes middle-class wealth, we went during the darkness of COVID to Prop 19 that limits inheritance and forces reassessment, ending generational wealth in one proposition. It ends multi-generational wealth continuity. It's over, done. Wealth no longer transfers, it resets upward. But you're not getting the jobs. Your children not getting the jobs. They too will lose the properties. Segment 5, the modern collapse. Billionaires and HQ exodus. Yeah, not the happy story here. Over the past 5 years, dozens of billionaires have relocated. Major companies have moved. They're out. If you don't have companies in here, especially the global headquarters, we're not California, we're not Silicon Valley anymore. There's no core infrastructure, the high jobs, up and out of here. Anybody with intelligence, anybody with wealth, anybody that was paying the higher taxes, anybody who had the freedom to up and leave is gone. Texas, Florida, Nevada, Idaho, out of here. They fled, trying to grab onto what else they could before even their pants were ripped off. Reasons? Taxes, regulations, unpredictability, massive crime, energy instability, people or policies, and people with ideas that wanted to move us from capitalism and destroy us as they dragged us to Marxism, socialism, and communism, which is all flavors of the same thing, have destroyed California. What is the billionaire tax? The billionaire tax is not just for billionaires. And we have seen many times in history, France is the one that keeps getting mentioned. When France decided to implement a billionaire tax, the billionaires left. That was it. They have the freedom to move. Billionaire tax is a proposed wealth tax. Now, you might think the state of California is coming up with this great idea. Well, on their own, they're not. It's actually a union. I think it's a healthcare union, as I recall, that decided they don't have enough money to pay for their own medical benefits for their own union members. So let's tax somebody else to get them to pay for this. You know, this is similar to in San Francisco. If you want to eat at a restaurant, I don't know if I didn't see it the last time I was up there, but about 10 years ago, 7 to 10 years ago, they decided, you know what, we only pay our restaurant employees a little bit of money and that's all we can afford to give them. So if you want to eat at a restaurant, you're going to buy health insurance for our employees. What? Isn't that why we pay for our food? But they couldn't put enough into it in order to justify that. So that was an extra line item. You pay tip, you pay tax, And then you have the healthcare fee. Well, this takes it a bit further. We don't have enough money to pay healthcare for our union members because we didn't negotiate a good enough contract. So you know what? You people over there have money. We're going to take money from you to pay for them. We already have the wonderful Obamacare program. Isn't that enough? No, it isn't enough. California wants more, and it wants everything. Billionaires bring companies, bring jobs, bring generational wealth and opportunities, intellectual opportunities that are massive. Major companies give to our communities. They donate hours and time and resources and products. In order to be at that level, not all CEOs, but founder CEOs have had to go through a lot. They've risked everything, often their home and their retirement, their livelihood, in order to just have a chance of having their dream come to reality. And once they get there, ask Mark Benioff how he's been treated. Or any of them. Constant begging for money. So the billionaire tax really isn't just about the billionaires and emptying out their taxes because they're leaving the state. The most publicly one was Elon Musk when he wasn't allowed to manufacture his Teslas in California. He up and left. SpaceX and Boring, they relocated. And just recently we saw that X moved its international headquarters from San Francisco to Texas town. They're gone. All those jobs, those opportunities. Once billionaires leave, they don't come back. But this proposed wealth tax isn't just about them. It hurts you and I short term as the jobs are gone. The networking opportunities, the consulting opportunities. But you know what it also does? It tests the market. If you can empty out the pockets of billionaires, you can do it to the middle class. How much more can you squeeze a turnip? They're going to figure it out. This is just a test. And no, it's never done once. It's not a one-time assessment of unrealized gains on property that you have to liquidate in order to pay for. It's a test that will become every 5 years, every 1 year, to everyone. That's the pathway they're on because they've proven this over and over again. It leads to a capital flight risk, a shrinking tax base, higher burden on remaining taxpayers. And who are the taxpayers? During COVID, we noticed that an extremely small percentage of the population in California actually works, meaning that they go to a job where they're adding value, and in exchange for that value, they're earning money into that system. And you can say, no, I know a lot of people that, well, where did they get their money? Is it from adding value or is it from taxpayer expansion? If they work for a town, a city, the state, the federal, what level of value are they adding other than part of a mechanism that collects your cash, uses your taxpayer money in order to fund their lifestyle? We need employees in those places, but do we need the level of employees that we have paid at the salaries that they have with the pensions they have? It's just a question. We may not. Some areas do. Some areas are bloated. And who makes those decisions? I didn't get to vote on it. But in addition to that, I asked again, who was working during COVID? We sure gave a lot of freebies. Anybody from anywhere on the planet can come over our Tijuana border. Just walk on into our country and get free housing, free food, money on EBT cards and cash cards, and they worked it. They would get their California scoop, go to Florida and get their scoop, other scoops they would go to, and they would just dip in. They wouldn't say that they got any benefits from another state. They just racked it all in. The shrinking tax base is not just because of the high burden on remaining taxpayers because of job losses. It's because there are not that many taxpayers left that are earning money to put back in the system that isn't part of the taxpayer loop. You can only launder that money so much. And as we saw from Minnesota, that money is being laundered right on out of the country. That doesn't go into the community. That doesn't help people like you and I. It doesn't help our schools. It's not about donations. And it's very scary what it's actually going to. What about fraud and welfare systems? EBT, unemployment fraud. Post-COVID, estimates have run into the billions of fraud. In fact, the number I saw this week was over $9 billion in fraud just since COVID. And we're looking at the breakdown. I believe it's triple that, at least. Investigative reporting, Midwest cases, they raise national questions. California systems are built to scale. And it's a scale of abuse, waste, fraud, and abuse at every level. I once was trying to explain to somebody the way the math works. They say, well, yes, we need to work harder to pay more taxes. And I say, why do we need to pay more taxes? When I was here and there were 10 people and 10 people were paying taxes, it was enough. We had a beautiful city, great roads, the street lights worked. But now that we're not 10 people, we're 100,000 people. We have potholes. We have lights that barely work. We have police that are constantly pulling over people that aren't doing anything, but avoiding areas where people need help. Our property taxes are higher than ever. You now take 10 times property taxes and how much income you have, and take 100,000 times property taxes and how much income you have at the much higher rate. The math isn't mathing. Where is that money going? No, I do not need to pay more in taxes. Those who are stewards of our money need to be responsible with other people's money. And until I see that, there's not a desire to loosen my purse strings anymore. No, the schools do not need more money. No, the fire departments do not need more money. No, the hospitals do not need more money. No, the children do not need more money. That's called money laundering. We're done with that game. You don't pull on my heartstrings by individuals who are more needy or vulnerable because you're allocating the money for waste, fraud, and abuse in other directions. Figure out a way to manage the budget or move over and allow somebody to do it. Over the last decade, I have been in survival mode, taking care of my son every step of the way, letting him know that money matters and being a good steward matters. And there's a way to survive. We don't enjoy it, and yet we find joy in every day. We struggle, and yet we figure it out every moment. There's a lot of days with tears and frustration, not understanding why this is happening, but understanding the mechanisms behind it, just that we don't have a voice. Everything's being taken. When fraud becomes normalized, honesty becomes disadvantaged. This is where lies come in, but we can't call them lies. Disinformation and misinformation and gaslighting. You're the problem. Have you ever stood there and stopped somebody in their tracks because you tell them that they're the racist one? And they think that's not possible. Look at my skin color. I can't be racist. And yet when they're commenting on your mannerisms, your tone of voice, your questions, or your right to breathe in that space, you are clearly the racist one. As California systems have mastered scale and the scale of abuse, again, I'll say when fraud becomes normalized, honesty becomes disadvantaged. It isn't about DEI, where we have divisiveness, inequality, and lack of effort. What happened to MEI? What is that? Merit, excellence, and intelligence? No, that's not allowed. Can you imagine in 2026 what this world would look like? What California would look like? It is a beautiful state with gorgeous mountains and Yosemite and just valleys, and then the cliffs into the ocean and the long beaches, and Hollywood and the industry of Silicon Valley. We have everything here. It is a beautiful paradise that has been stolen from the people and given to people who don't care. They don't have the same values. They don't have the same appreciation. There's a level of greed that exists. And I'll say again, when you're removed from your family, you don't have a checks and balances. You don't get to see how joyful life can be when somebody's in their 80s or 90s. You don't get the laughter of the next generation of seeing toddlers run around. You don't get to sit at a table once a week or 7 days a week and laugh and talk about your day and have the generations who came before you with wisdom say, no, we don't do that in this world. No, that's not honest. No, we don't force drugs into people. No, we don't force people to live in their homes. No, we don't sit behind computers and lie to people. This isn't what we do. But when you can remove people out of their culture, out of their family unit, no matter where they are on the planet, all of a sudden they're put into a situation of working for money, leveraging greed, and pushing for survival to not have to leave the new place that they're in. This isn't about building community. It's about ripping community away from those existing and giving it to individuals who are being manipulated. So segment 6, daily life failures. PG&E just offered San Francisco residents, I believe it was $200, because power outages in the city of San Francisco, one of the largest and most noted cities on the planet, kept going out. Well, every time it goes out, everything in your refrigerator and freezer is ruined. You have to replace that. So $200 credit, not even cash card, but credit, doesn't go very far. In fact, you're in a hole. Now, for restaurants or businesses, they offered them $2,500. But one lady came forward and said, I run a fish market. I have 2 different locations, and the loss was over $10,000. What am I going to each time? What is she going to do with $2,500? Write it off? That's a major loss for a small business. And who wanted to be around that smelly fish? But these daily life failures, why in 2026 does PG&E think it's okay to shut off the power or have the power go down? How is it they're involved in so many cities being burnt to the ground? How is it that there isn't enough electricity, so we have to have solar panels, but anybody who had solar panels is penalized? There's no accountability here. But you know what? My rates go up every year. They're massive. That played into the loss of our home. You can't put quarters in a wall and understand how much they're going to charge you because it's going to change. It's volatile. So without being able to prepay, it couldn't cut off. We went years without heat, not even turning on the heater. There's no air conditioner. We have windows. And yet we couldn't survive like that. The baseline bills were too much. Internet stability. As you might recall from yesterday, it took hours to be able to get the internet up just to be able to record. In 2026 in Silicon Valley. Now, more than 20 years ago, Metrocom had a mobile Wi-Fi that they hooked to the street lights. That was phenomenal. That's gone. We don't really have a better solution, even though the internet was hardwired into the place that I'm at now. And yet we couldn't get Wi-Fi. Often when they come out, they tell us that there's a clasp on it. I can't think of the name on it, that pinches the cable and throttles it. So somebody purposely makes a decision that you don't deserve all the internet you can, and they clamp it down so it's limited. I've had that removed twice from residents I've lived at. Water mismanagement. There's not enough water. When I was young, we used to have a little bucket that we could use each day, each one of us. Because if you dared use more water than that, like flush the toilet every day, run the water while you're brushing the teeth, it would be so costly that my parents couldn't pay the bill. And yet the water is sold to other states and dumped in the ocean. Fresh water. And yet, if you dare to drill a well under your home, that's a major penalty. Or what if you are farm? You now have to tell the state of California how much your well pulls up. And I don't know now if they're taxing that, but that's definitely on the horizon. Because all resources in California apparently belong to California. What about the roads destroying vehicles? I drove to San Francisco this last week and got a huge pebble breaking the windshield of my car. There's nothing I could have done about that. You can't see pebbles on the road. I wasn't following too close. But they get kicked up from the roadways because nobody manages the roads. And potholes are everywhere. But you know, it's interesting. Some cities take care of it. So as you're going along 5 as an example, or 101, you'll have an immense amount of potholes. And then all of a sudden for a mile or two, there'll be no potholes. And then you're back to potholes. It's the same thing as soon as you leave the state and you get into Oregon or Nevada, no potholes. It's amazing. All of a sudden the land is perfect and you can pave over it as long as you're not in California. Yet every October, as they empty out the budgets, you will find massive contractors paving roads. Just enough so they get the contract the next year as well, dumping all those tax dollars. Because if it's allocated and not used, it can't roll over. There's budget constrictions. So they burn through, and then the next year use that excess that they had to state why they need even more. We need 10% more this year, every year. 12% more this year, every year. It grows and grows. When is it enough? Policing paralysis. This morning after I got up and walked the dogs, I went to the gym. And on the way to the gym, I drove by the San Jose Police Department. And there were 3 dump trucks, large moving vehicles for dumping, that went past me. So first of all, these massive vehicles should not have been going faster than the speed limit. But what really struck me is my son and I will count how many vehicles go by us that have expired DMV tags. During COVID, people didn't seem to pay them. There were a lot of cars here that were foreign cars that never registered in California. They got away with it. They weren't pulled over. Well, these 3 large trucks with individuals who looked of a specific descent didn't even have a precept of a license plate, more or less DMV tags. There's not even a place to put a license plate in the back of these. And yet they're driving around our roads. Now there's a statement, just mind your own business. But if that major truck has a problem or a breakdown, we already know that they're breaking the law. And if they don't have DMV tags, they don't have insurance. You can't get insurance in California unless you have proof of payment of your DMV tags. And you can't get DMV tags if you don't have current insurance. So if they hit you or something falls off of these trucks, that's on you. That comes out of that little money that you had left once taxes were paid. What about housing shortages despite record spending? I still maintain that just as much as it's not the immigrants' problem or issue, it's not the unhoused issues in most cases either. Immigrants come here because they want to have a better life. They bought into the vision just as much as we were sold the vision. They're families like you and I for the most part, unlike what we're seeing in Minnesota. There's crime and theft, but that's not the majority of who people are. We're families. We want better life for ourselves. But what about these housing shortages? Where are people supposed to live? I told you that during COVID up at Tahoe, I met a woman who happened to be my neighbor here. She'd only been here a year and a half, working for a tech company, and bought a multi-million-dollar home. No job. Well, no job history. You usually have to have a 2-year job history proving that you have longevity in the career and you have 2 W-2s. Credit history. You have to have a credit history showing that you can buy, borrow, and pay it back. And then money in your savings account proving that you're able to save and manage expenses. How did somebody that was here, less than a 2-year requirement for you and I, build a high enough credit score, have the asset verification, job verification, in order to have the income to buy that house that you and I just lost? You're paying more for less because money is no longer tied to outcomes. It's just other people's money, and it happens to be your money. Segment number 7, what comes next? A few options here. Option 1, you can stay and comply. I'm in a sandwich. My parents are older. My child is younger. I can't leave the state yet. So I'm stuck here in survival mode every day trying to figure out my next hustle. Hustle used to be a negative word. Hustle now just means way to earn money to survive. But then I have to pay increasingly higher taxes. There's fewer services. In fact, I'm constantly being told and laughed at that because of my skin color, and yes, that's what they say, that I can't benefit from this. Why would I ask for help? And so my voice gets quieter and quieter. Less voice for myself, my peers, my neighbors are gone. What is the next step? Option 2, exit. The mass talent drain that we're seeing, the tax base collapse and accelerated decline. All these teacher retirements and union retirements and state and city retirements. If the tax base goes, there's nothing left. Is there anything left now anyways if nobody's actually earning money to pay the taxes? That cycle is a pyramid scheme. Option 3, rebuild the contract. Let's make up a different pathway. People are policies. Let's get people in there who care. Newsom doesn't care about you and I. All he wants are our children, and it's disgusting. Contribution matters again. Enforcement without favoritism. Systems audited, not narrated. Outcomes over ideology. Now, for so many of us, seeing that moment where Charlie left was definitely a mourning for loss of individual who was standing up for people other than himself, who cared more about a movement and for truly creating the country of the vision that his grandparents had left for him. But we also knew that with the removal of Charlie also meant that vision that freedom. That was an opportunity, somebody as a leader that stood up for a next generation. And that silence hurt us deeply. Not just the hatred, but the silence. And now what has come out of the rubble 5 days later is corruption and money laundering, allegedly. Nothing's been proven, but there's a lot of questions that are either not being answered or misinformation that's being shoveled out. We're done with the slop. That's it. No. So unfortunately, this very promising legacy that was created in this movement that so many of us believed in, and that wasn't just me or my family, that was globally. People tuned in to listen to Charlie of all backgrounds and skin colors and hair color, because we all believed that together we could make something great again, have something for our families, and do it together under capitalism, where we could make decisions and have freedom. And look at the disgusting mess that has come out of that. A conspiracy happened. A crime was created in front of the world to see. We were mocked for saying we don't think so. And now look at what is rising out of that. Absolutely disgust. So in closing, California doesn't need more money. It needs honesty. It doesn't need more programs. It needs accountability. And it doesn't need more guilt. It needs courage. History shows us one truth. Civilizations don't collapse from invasion first. They collapse when they stop rewarding the people who are holding them up. The question isn't whether California can be saved. The question is whether those still paying for it are willing to demand it. As you look at your family today and spend the time with them, just take a moment and think about what freedom means to you. What are your values? What are your morals? Are you acting in alignment with those? When you go to work or you run your company, are you acting in alignment with what your grandparents taught you? There's a lot of wisdom out there. And unfortunately, those mid-runway on the career ladder know that they'll get pushed off if they speak out. We're seeing that with social credit scores. The silence. But that doesn't have to be that way. We can live again in beautiful California. We can treat everybody with open arms and relaxation, open arms and invitations. Whether they're our neighbors, they're passing through, coworkers, anybody. But this needs to be mutual. And the stance that the Somalians took in Minnesota is just the pinnacle of showing that when you replace the local police with your own police from a broken country, from broken individuals who are stealing us blind, that police isn't there for cultural reasons to make their community feel better. That police is to keep you out, to keep the money shoveling from you into their pockets. Don't ask questions. They will yell at you. They will attack you. That doesn't mean that they're the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. That means that crimes are being committed. They're yelling louder to shut you up. It's time once again to raise your voice. Raise your voice. And I certainly hope we can make California great again, because whatever direction California goes seems to be how the United States and the world follows. Let's not be lemmings. It's not time to have the world follow off this cliff. Let's find joy in today. Let's bring back the people that can have the right policies.